Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Asmiti bhikkhave papanchita metang ayang ahang asmiti papanchita metang ti. Dear friends in Dhamma, so in this retreat, actually we are taking various components into consideration. So one thing is that we are trying to maintain the sila, the morality, so that our mind become more and more calmer, because our body is restrained and the words are restrained, speech is restrained. So therefore supporting our whole path through the morality, sila, virtues is very important. So that's why we first of all try to observe precepts, and we have given some prominence to maintain certain amount of restraint. And then actually Buddha mentioned the importance of the Suttame Jnana, or what we call as the referring to various Buddha's teachings, so that we get some guidance. So it is not that what we are developing here, what we are practicing here is something that we automatically or randomly selected. Rather, Buddha has taught that. So many certain suttas are explaining the path. So recognizing those suttas, the teachings, the authentic teachings of the Buddha always helps to guide us and again give us a lot of confidence. It is not my own path that I am going, rather Buddha has mentioned this here and there, and many have practiced that and they have received several benefits. So I am also now following that ancient path. So understanding the Buddha's teaching is therefore quite important. Actually that is what right now we are trying to do. Next, Buddha mentioned that it is necessary to have some concern about the discussion, because sometimes when we are continuing the path, there may be certain doubts, there may be gray areas, and again there may be certain decisions that we can't or we are unable to make because of our inability, or because of the kind of doubtful, skeptic kind of mind. On such situations, having a good discussion is very important. Sakacca anuggahita. Then Buddha mentioned about the samatha. That means we are calming down the mind, very much concentrating the mind, focusing the mind. That is also necessary. Otherwise, it is very difficult to understand what Buddha is preaching. It is not that we are trying to conceptualize the whole thing and think and then understand. Rather, first we need to calm down the mind, concentrate the mind, relax the mind, collect the mind. And that is one component. That is what tranquility practice, the samatha meditation. So samatha anuggahita is therefore quite important. Then as the last one, Buddha mentioned as the Vipassana anuggahita, where with the already prepared mind or focused mind, now you are doing a thorough investigation. What's happening right now? What are the phenomena presently arising? And to those present phenomena, we are trying to pay attention. And as a result of that, we are capable of understanding the true nature of them. So that is leading towards a proper understanding. So that is the Vipassana anuggahita. So basically, Buddha emphasized these 5 components or these 5 supports in our practice. One thing is the sila, the morality. Second one is the sutta, that is the learnedness, some understanding coming through the Buddha's teaching. Then the discussion. Then fourth as the tranquility practice, and last as the vipassana or the insight practice. So if we are supporting our practice time to time with all these different supports, then Buddha very much like guarantee, yes, you are developing, you are progressing. There's a higher possibility that you are going to be successful. And on the other hand, I like to add a little word on the Sutta Anuggahita. That is where we are gaining some knowledge, referring certain books, reading books, listening to Dhamma, memorizing Dhamma, and all these things are important, necessary. But at the same time, when we are doing our practice, all what we have heard have to be kept aside. So we have to maintain a beginner's mind. We may be quite knowledgeable, we may be a learned person, we may have various degrees, but that is not the important thing when we are doing the practice. Having the beginner's mind is utterly important. So that's why we need to have a very innocent kind of a mind, grounded mind, say beginner's mind, a mind which is inquiring, not thinking that I am an expert, rather thinking that, okay, I don't know anything, that's why I am trying to investigate, to understand the true nature. It is not that I am trying to prove my own kind of a prejudice, rather I am maintaining an open mind, open attitude, and I am ready to accept whatever the situation provides, whatever the investigation is giving us as an understanding, I am ready to accept. So that kind of a very open awareness, open attention, open investigation, unbiased investigation is what we are aiming. So that's why as learned people, sometimes we have this bad habit where we are keeping our book knowledge in front of the experiential knowledge. So what we are trying to emphasize here is the experiential knowledge, not the book knowledge. So during our practice, always try to keep the experiential knowledge in the front. Don't allow your mind to talk, comment on your results immediately. Rather, allow the practice to continue without disturbing it. So when the things are naturally progressing, don't disturb it with various book knowledge, what you have heard, your own conclusions. Don't put those into the picture, rather allow things to happen more naturally. And with that note, actually I can turn into the topic of the retreat. So actually last couple of months we have taken one particular sutta. This is called Yavakalapi Sutta. We can translate it as a sheaf of barley. So Yavakalapi. So it's an interesting simile what Buddha has given. So Buddha mentioned during the old days, you know that barley is another grain. So you can use it for any type of grain. And they are using something called flail. Something called flail to, trashing flail to remove those grains. So they are attached to those husks. And to remove them from the husk and gather all the grains, they are using thrashing. They are thrashing to that heap of barley using these flails. The flail is a kind of an instrument where a long stick is available, and to that there's a little flat stick connected so that it can freely hit the heap of barley. The simile is where Buddha mentioned the 6 people are coming from 6 directions and hitting this heap of barley, thrashing this heap of barley, attacking this heap of barley. And as a result of that, Buddha mentioned, okay, that is completely almost like powdered, because it's a constant thrashing. And then Buddha had another 7th person come, and he too do the same thing. And therefore that heap of barley is completely thrashed, completely almost like powdered. In other sense, we can say it very much like destroyed. And the simile, now he is connecting with the human mind, where Buddha mentioned, okay, through the eyes we are looking various sights, through the ears we are hearing various sounds, through the nose we are recognizing various odors. So what happened to the mind? Is it everything fine? So because of this, the constant bombarding coming through the senses, so mind is the one going to be thrashed, going to be hit, going to be struck. So if we are not restraining our faculties, our senses, so constantly we are getting so much of things to our eyes. A lot of news, a lot of noise, sound, songs, many, many things. Through the nose also the same, through the tongue also the same, through the body also same. And if nothing happens through those five senses, we start thinking and then utter confusion. And the last one added is representing the thinking about the future. So you may have a plan for next birth. So that is what the seventh man representing. So you are having another ambition to become a deva, to become a mighty god, to become a powerful politician, whatever it is. So that is adding as the seventh person. So ultimately your mind become fully trashed, fully occupied with all these different information, with all these different data, sense objects coming through these senses. And that is one simile Buddha mentioned. And the next simile is also very interesting. That is where Buddha mentioned that there was a very ancient war happened between the Devas and the Asuras. And there Buddha mentioned the Devas have won the battle, won the war. And what they did was bound the king of the Asuras. His name is called Vepachitti. And they took him to the assembly hall, which is called Sudhamma. So the Devas' assembly hall is called Sudhamma, to which this Vepachitti was taken. The interesting point here is that his neck and the four, the 2 arms and the legs are bound. So to 5 places now he is bound. Now this is not a typical kind of bound. So what he mentioned is now if Vepachitti thinks these devas are quite righteous, asuras are unrighteous, without going back to the asura realm, I better stay with the devas. If he thinks like that, then all the bondages, all the binds are very much relaxed and he is released. But typically, that's the opposite is the most possible thing, because he is in fight with the devas. So if he think these devas are not righteous, unrighteous, and the asuras are righteous, I need to escape from the devas and I need to go back to asura realm. Then all his bonds are being bound, being further strengthened. So the whole thing is situated or determined through his thought. The whole bondage, either it is being released or either it is being further strengthened, is determined based on the Vepachitti's thought. So now Buddha mentioned, so this type of a bond is extremely subtle, but it is more subtler is the Maras bond. Even if we think I am, then you are being bound. Simple as that. So we all are very much like in that bondage. We are very much like bound to that Maras bondage. So now he is talking about various possibilities, how we get trapped in this Maras bond. So that's what we were discussing in these last couple of months. So it comes up with 5 types of basic thought generations, we can say. How our mind is working, how our thought process is generated. So very, very interesting in a way. It is quite philosophical as well as very, very practical, very interesting. The first one is called Manyitang. So that means conceiving. So we all like to conceive. I-based imagining, I-based imaginations. I am going to do like this, I am going to do like this, I am this and I am this, I am that. So likewise the imaginations, the conceiving part. That's called Manyita. So we spent 1 month discussing that part, so I am not going to repeat the whole thing again. So that is one way of thinking. So our mind tends to think based on various imaginations. Really it didn't happen, but I can imagine, I can conceive. But that conceiving or imagination has a center point, that is I. I am there. So based on I, now I am thinking, but that thinking is very much imagination. That is one area. Next, Buddha mentioned called injita. So that is where our thought process is very much influenced by craving. Say when you have some kind of a desire, so more and more thinking is generated. So you are being influenced by inner craving, inner desire, inner greed. So this is another area Buddha mentioned. So your thought process is further and further strengthened. You are more and more thinking. Now suppose you want to assume that your car is really outdated and now you are going through a lot of trouble. And now you are imagining, or rather you are thinking, you are desiring to buy a new one. You are looking here and there, you are going to various places. And so likewise, so more and more desires as you are enjoying, more and more thinking in many different ways. Say in many different lines, now you are thinking because there is a considerable desire available in the mind. Can you hear? Okay. So that desire driven thinking. So that is what we call as the injita. So internally there is a desire, and that desire promotes more and more thinking. Now you can imagine, when you are having your first love affair, probably you can imagine how much you have thought about it, how many thoughts have generated from your mind, and the whole day you may be thinking. A lot of desires are there, a lot of imaginations are there, a lot of dreams are there. Wherever you see him or you see her, and more desires and more thinking. So desire driven thinking. So that is another area. So Buddha highlights. Second one. Third one is called pandita. So that is where we like to be attached or we like to be dependent. And when what we have dependent being threatened, or what we have dependent being kind of subject to change, then we are immediately frightened or we are being little frustrated and we start thinking. Say for example, all of a sudden now we all are located very safely in Kalalgoda. There is no ripples in the ground. Everything appear like rock solid. All of a sudden what happened? Earthquake happened here in Kalalgoda. So you can imagine, so where we hooked up, where we strongly attached, where we are fully dependent, if that is being threatened, so we are promoting more and more I-related thinking. So we are our existence being threatened. So many thoughts. So this pandita means, so likewise, so we are so dependent. Our minds are so dependent. We as human beings, we are so dependent. So those depending components, those objects, if they are going through any kind of a change, disaster, we being the dependent, actually we are being shocked. As a result of that, we start thinking. So I being threatened. I am going to die. I am being sort of in a trouble. Please help me. So likewise, more and more thinking is promoted. So this is another area Buddha mentioned where the thought provocation or thought generation going to happen. The fourth one is what actually we are going to discuss today. It is called papanchita. That means the conceptual proliferation. So we are fond of thinking. We are fond of conceptual proliferation. Aren't you? Now say for example, when you are not having enough sights to see, assume that it's the electricity cut, the power cut. So you can't see the movies, you can't watch the TV, nothing, you can't see. So you can't switch on the radio, you can't switch on the whatever the instrument, no electricity. So there is no incense. And assume that your fridge is also empty. You can't eat. And you are simply alone. There is nothing no kind of another affection available. So all 5 senses are very much like passive now, inactive. What are you going to do? Are you going to enjoy that, or you may take a chair and just sit and thinking when this electricity going to come, what this government is doing, huh? so much of either thinking or hating in one line, or going to dreaming in another line, maybe about thinking what has happened during your childhood, how much you enjoyed when the electricity was available, and what was the possibility that if electricity is available, what are you going to look at? What is the famous teledrama that you are missing? What is the famous movie you are missing? So many different areas, not just single area, many areas, many directions. So it's very much like scattered thinking. So your mind is very much scattered in various directions, and this thinking process is going into many directions. So thinking in many directions, there is no proper objective in your thinking, there is no proper aim, but mind is simply thinking in many different subjects, in many different areas. There is no such kind of a, proper connection in between all these things. So it's kind of manifold type of thinking. So that is called prapancha, conceptual proliferation. And interesting thing is, we have an inner tendency to like that. We have an inner trait to like that. So you can think about yourself, you can verify about your mind, you can investigate about your own mind, how much you are fond of thinking, how much you are fond of conceptual proliferation. So you may spend even hours, days thinking. Suppose someone is asking a question and you may need to give a kind of a decision. How many ways are you going to think? Maybe thinking about the future, thinking about the past and the present situation. And in many lines, many areas you need to consider. So you are going to end up with kind of an obsession even, isn't it? So ultimately you can't stop yourself. Assume that you need to stop. It's now overwhelming. The mind is taking you for a ride. Now you need to stop. But unfortunately now you can't stop. So this is very beautifully explained in the sutta called Madhupindika Sutta, which is available in Majjhima Nikaya. So once Buddha has given a brief teaching, so he didn't give a proper explanation. So the monks were in a kind of a puzzle how to understand the brief teaching. So they all went to Venerable Mahakaccana. He is quite capable of explaining Dhamma in detail. Something profound he explained in detail so that the others can understand. So that's the special skill he had. So those monks went to Venerable Mahakaccana. So he is explaining this whole genesis of this conceptual proliferation, how they are starting from the very beginning. So it actually has 3 stages. So Most Venerable Katukurunde Jnanananda Bhante, he very beautifully explained that in these 3 stages available in this whole process. The first stage is very much common even to Arhants. So that is very much dependently arisen part. As a cause and effect relationship, things are happening. Say when you have an open eye, when you have a healthy eye, when the light is available, illumination is available, and there is a object in front of you, and if you turn your attention to that, what happens? You can see, isn't it? So the seeing happens. And as a result of that, there may be a kind of a feeling. Assume that you are seeing someone, say, you like to see. And at that time, there's a kind of a pleasurable feeling arise. And now you start recognizing. Actually, till feeling, all these things are very much like dependently arisen. So there is no one doing it, rather the dependently arisen. Say I, the form, the light, your attention, all these things are the necessary conditions. And when those necessary conditions are there, the sight happens, though the seeing happens. And then the feeling happens. So all these things are common to even to the Buddha. Similarly, say your eyes, your ears are quite healthy and you are attentively listening, and a sound happens, and then you can hear it. Hearing happens. And as a result of that, there may be a feeling as well. Say if it is a song, for example, then probably a pleasant feeling. If someone is blaming, criticizing, then maybe a little sorrow, kind of a painful feeling. So every such kind of a sense impingement, there is an associating feeling. So all these things are very much dependently arisen. And same thing to the nose, to the tongue, to the body, and even to the mind. So there is a dependently arisen component, which is the front part, which is the early stage. Then what happened? Now I involved to the picture. I want to look at what has happened. I want to intervene. You as a person, you now interfere to the process, and you want to recognize whom I have seen. Now suppose your son came, your brother came, your husband came, wife came, someone whom you like to see, now he has come. Now you recognize. Now you are participating into the picture, into the incident, and you recognize. And once you recognize, you start thinking, oh, why he has come? Maybe he wants me to come back. How am I going to meditate? Why am I going to go back? So likewise, you now start in many directions, little bit of thinking. So that is where you are now involving yourself. You as a person, now you are putting your hand, and now you start thinking in one direction, now you start thinking in another direction, you start thinking maybe with respect to the past, you start thinking with respect to the future, you again start thinking with respect to some imagination, you start thinking with respect to something. Now what happened? Now we are initiating that manifold type of thinking, right? Not just in one direction, now you are participating into manifold thinking. So far, somewhat all right, things are happening under your control. Now this is the second stage where as a person you involve. Now the last stage is the most important one. That is where you become what? You become the victim. You are the one started, but ultimately you become the victim. You can't stop now. So the thinking machine is taking you for a ride. You can't stop yourself. Very much like kind of an obsession is going on, rumination is going on. You can even end up with depression. You can see how much depth we can go, how much harm we can do to ourselves by overthinking. So this is where the third stage, where what we call as a papancha, the conceptual proliferation, ultimately completely overwhelm the person whom that started that whole process. So therefore, this conceptual proliferation is therefore one cause of, we can say, mental diseases. Maybe the depression, maybe, I don't know, what else? Maybe doubts, phobia, this and that. So many mental diseases are there. So overthinking, rumination, obsessive thinking, all these things, I think that's a name, obsessive, what's that, OCD? Obsessive compulsive disorder. Yes. So you can see, too much thinking is lead to kind of a completely vulnerable situation. So we are ultimately helpless. So you can't stop yourself. So it can happen. Now these three stages are beautifully explained in this Madhupindika Sutta. So actually that the very front part, the early stage happening to everyone as a causal reaction or kind of a conditioned process, as a dependent process. And the second part is where we interfere to the picture as a person, and ultimately the third stage is where we become a victim, kind of a slave. Now, and on the other hand, I like to add another sutta here. Venerable Sariputta mentioned, if you like to have a good death, how are you going to behave? So, on the other hand, we can say, if you behave in a particular way, wrong way we can say, you are going to have an unfortunate death. The first one is called, what you call kammaramu. So you are fully involved with, you want to occupy yourself with various activities. There is no rest at all. One activity after another activity. One activity after another activity. You can think about your own life. Do you have any time to rest? Do you have any time to breathe? So say you end doing one activity. Say you completed your one assignment. And once it is done, you want to assign yourself to another thing. So you are involved with another activity. Suppose that you finish that. Very unlikely you complete it. Right? I mean, you have to do another activity. So in between you stop that, you remember, okay, that is more important. Now you catch that and you do that. And once you halfway complete that, you start another activity. So how many activities are there for you to complete? How many obligations? How many responsibilities? When are you going to complete them? So in our whole life, so we are fully occupied, isn't it? So many activities are there, many things to involve, and everything you think utterly important, and you are more responsible as a mother, as a father, as a citizen. So you want to struggle, isn't it? Aragalaya, another activity. Many things are there. So you are involved. So Buddha mentioned that if you are too much involved with all these different activities, and you are very much like this activity driven like. So these activities are the ones deciding your behavior. So many activities are there. So that activity being, so you are attracted to that activity and you are doing it. Now suppose you have a desire to meditate, but you can't do it because there is something to complete. And now you are doing it. So while doing that, suppose now you again get another thought to meditate. No, I can't. There's another thing to do. So likewise, we keep on postponing because a lot of other things are there to do. So this is one reason Buddha mentioned, rather this Venerable Sariputta mentioned, so you can't have a peaceful death. The second one is called Bassaramu. That means too much talking. Talkativeness, talking, always. So that actually in today's terms we can say very much like through your mouth you are talking as well as to your writing, your, somehow you are internally, there is no any peace. Kind of an inner chatter going on and on. So talking, too much talking. Then Nissarana. So you are fond of sleeping. So in the morning also you get late, early, tired, no? Maybe late for the breakfast, and then after the breakfast is a little heavy, so you had a little nap. Then maybe a little late lunch, that's also more heavy, and then you had the evening nap. Then at night, it's too late, to do something, then have your dinner and then again sleep. So likewise, there are certain people, they are more fond of sleeping. And the same thing, so you can't have a good death, a peaceful death. Then the fourth one is called Sanganikaramattu. So that means you want to you delight in company. You always want to have another friend with you, and you have a chat with another person. Always need kind of an engagement. You can't be alone. I mean, you can't simply secluded. You feel lost when you feel secluded. So you always want someone to attach. You always want someone's company. Either call, you chat or message. You go and meet and have that kind of a company. So that is called Sanganikaramata in Pali. Very much like socializing. You have no time to think about yourself. So you are fully engaged. You are fully occupied. So then Venerable Sariputta says that another reason that you can't have a peaceful death. The fifth one is called Sansaggaramata, where you have too much close relationships, very much like bonded with some people, and you can't, without them, kind of too many intimate relationships. Then the sixth one is what we call the Papancharamatu. That means you are fond of mental proliferation. Constantly thinking, obsessive thinking, overthinking, what we are talking today. So that is another important point, that our minds are very much occupied every time. Even though our senses are somewhat having a kind of a rest, still mind is talking. Inner chatter is continuing. Too much thinking. There is no rest to the mind. So this is what we are emphasizing today. So Buddha mentioned papanchabirata paja nippapancha tathagata. So this whole folk, not only humans, even the devas and all these celestial beings, so we as folk, we are fond of thinking. We are fond of obsessive thinking. We are fond of overthinking. And we don't know the limit. We can't stop thinking. And we can't even think about a world without thinking. Now suppose about your inner kind of a personality. How about having a couple of minutes without any thought? Can you imagine such a state of mind? A mind without thinking. There's an interesting book a couple of years ago, one psychotherapist, Thoughts Without a Thinker. Even there is no thinker, thinking is going on. So we are in a bad situation. And that is why, certain mental diseases are called, schizophrenia. So sometimes people think that someone is inserting thoughts to my mind. So I can't stop thinking. So someone is influencing my mind. So someone is inserting thoughts. So that's a mental disease. So you can see how much this thinking is taking, this thinking is taking us. So what a depth is there. We can ultimately become completely, end up with the mental hospital if we are going like this. So that's why, we need to look about these things. We need to investigate these things. Because the other thing is, what we are thinking is mostly not important or harmful sometimes. Now, if we know what exactly we want to think, what is beneficial to think, then that's a good thing. So this discussion doesn't mean that we are trying to prohibit thinking. Don't go to that extreme either. It is not kind of a prohibition of thinking. So thinking is a very important, very valuable skill we as human beings have. And that is where in Sabbasava Sutta, for example, so Buddha talks about the beneficial type of thinking, yoniso manasikara. So if you want to think, okay, you recognize, okay, these are the beneficial line of thinking. By thinking in that line, okay, something benefit is there, probably you are thinking in that line. But most of the time, we are not aware of that. So we are simply allow the mind to wander, allow the mind to think whatever it likes, and we, like a puppet, is simply being driven by all those thinking. And mostly those are defilement based thinking, and ultimately end up with conflicts, ultimately end up with a lot of misunderstandings, arguments, many things are there. Now say for example, assume that someone yesterday, say, look at you in a little bit of an angry mood. At that time you didn't make much notice, but after coming back home you immediately take that point to your mind. Just one time. Maybe while having dinner, another time. In the morning, early morning, another time. Maybe during the lunchtime, another time. Maybe after another 1 hour, another time. Now what happened? Slowly, you are strengthening that doubt. Isn't it happening within yourself? Now say, so when you are, assume that, say you are the housewife, say your husband is coming back home, and there may be a kind of a message from some unknown woman in your husband's phone. You might have noticed it. Maybe later you maybe have a little thought about it. Who is that one? Maybe another time you are having a little doubt. When he go back next day morning to his work, you are having more doubts. Isn't it happening within our minds? So this little doubt we can aggravate, we can expand, we can multiply, ultimately end up with arguments, ultimately end up with a lot of doubts, and even, divorce and all these problems. So internally we are making a lot of things. So the actual event may be a insignificant something, but we can make it a huge something, huge argument or huge substantial thing within our mind. So having kind of a restraint into this kind of thinking is utterly important. So therefore this mental proliferation is something causing various mental diseases. That is one area. The other thing is all different kinds of arguments, conflicts, misunderstandings, wars, battles, many different troubles are causing because of this uncontrolled, unrestrained kind of thinking. Now, there's another area that I like to take your attention. Now, say for example, now if you want to make this clock, do you want to think about it? You have to, right? So you have to think about it. I mean, how am I going to prepare it? What are the materials that I am going to take? How I am going to prepare it? What are the electronics available? How the power has to be given? How the, say, mechanical components to be connected? What are the colors I am going to include? What's the shape? Ultimately, what would be the price that I am going to sell it? So it's a product of what? Product of thinking, right? It's a product of thinking. So someone else's product of thinking, right, is just one person or many people. Either one person, if it is a single person's, say, what you call a creation. Otherwise, it may be a kind of a teamwork, a group effort. Now, when you see this at a supermarket, what happened to your mind? Actually, this is not a very interesting part, by the way. I mean, you can imagine various interesting things, right? Nowadays, some interesting finding, maybe a scientific finding, maybe an electronic gadget, maybe the very first time that you come across a smart phone. Now heard about the Vega, that car coming, which is electric, what's that? Electrically driven. Maybe you can thought about it. It's a good one. I mean, we are also going to buy a, electric three-wheeler. I am thinking about it to buy it to our monastery, electric three-wheeler. Thinking about it. So when there are such kind of products, so what happened to our mind? So our thinking initiates, isn't it? So all those concepts, all those products are the products of our thinking, and those products, those languages, those words. Now, how about our language? How about these words? How about grammar? Are they products of various people's thinking, designing? They are, right? So there may be various people and they want to have kind of a communication among themselves. So they come up with various ways how to communicate. How our languages have evolved. Maybe in the good old days they didn't have this much of sophisticated language. They may use their hand signs and various way of communication. But later it has developed to letters. I mean, previously there was no even letters. Then they found out how to write letters. Then various instruments to write letters. Then books, various scriptures, and now the internet. So you can imagine how these things are again and again developing, and when they are available, what happened to the person who are perceiving that? They also start thinking. So therefore, there are two sides to this whole process. So one thing is that internally our mind have a kind of a dynamic tendency to proliferate. That is a kind of individual tendency within our mind. So that is individual to you. You prefer proliferation. That's a kind of an inner tendency. As a result of that, you are proliferating. As a result of that, you are thinking this way, that way. Obsessive thinking is there. That is one side. That's the dynamic part. But there are static parts, static components. So they are the ones everywhere. So what as we human beings, what we have prepared, what we have created, so they are there, which are always inviting us to think. Please think about me. Now, say, when you are, adorning yourself. Why? You want someone to think about you. Pay some special attention. Say, why are you preparing a beautiful, flower garland or something? So all these things, actually what we have made, what we have prepared, what we have created, all these concepts, all the languages, terminologies, different products, everything very much like promotes thinking. So this is the answer actually Buddha given to the King Sakka when he is asking what is the cause of thinking. And there Buddha mentioned these concepts which have the tendency to think. So what surrounding us are all these different concepts. So you can't think without concepts. Can you think without concepts? Now this is a very interesting area. You can again think. Can you think without concepts? Now, in order to think, you need at least few words, you need some languages. So these words, languages are all concepts. They are not real. So they are either mind-made, human-made. They are all concepts. And I mean, our names, for example, different terminologies, all are concepts. And with all these concepts we are thinking, and ultimately the problem is we take concepts as true, concepts as so rigid, as solid, and they are substantial, they are utterly important. Now say someone tomorrow tell that our national anthem has to be rapped out, had to be come up with a new national anthem. Are you going to agree? How many of you are going to go against it? Shall we start another struggle against the changing of national anthem? Is the national anthem real? Is something that you can touch? So what is national anthem? It's a concept, isn't it? So So how many concepts are there in this whole world? And you can't count, right? So all these letters, numbers are all concepts. So we are thinking based on concepts, and we are using them for our, very much proper communication, for kind of comfortable living. But unfortunately, we take all these concepts as true, expecting they to be true, and I like certain concepts, and if someone is against those concepts, I am going to argue. I am going to go against that person. That's why, you can go for a war with another group based on concepts. Isn't it? We can kill each other based on concepts. Isn't it? So we are killing each other merely for concepts. Now say someone is changing a name of a road. One group is coming and telling, okay, this should be the name of the road. I don't like that name. Another group may be available who like that name, the previous name. Now they are in conflicts. They can go to argument. They can go to conflict. And they can kill each other merely for concepts. So these concepts therefore promote more thinking. Now we have a kind of a vicious cycle here. Vicious cycle is this. Now when we see through our eyes, that we are coming to a dependently arisen process. It's a kind of an innocent process, common to even to the Buddha. And then we put our hand to that process where we involve, and we start recognizing, and then we start thinking. Now we start manifold thinking, and ultimately we become overwhelmed by thinking. And on the other hand, whenever I see various concepts, whenever I see various products of concepts, whenever I see products of various people's imaginations, thinking and etc., I tempt to think. Aren't we in a kind of a vicious cycle? Now say for example, that's what I take this. Now, where this has earlier made someone else's mind, right? So now say for example, you are given a lump of clay to a potter, for example. So who is deciding that I am going to make a pot? I am going to make what else? What other things? Maybe vase, a flower vase. Who is going to decide? The potter, right? So where the vase is first created? In the potter's mind, isn't it? So if he is expecting a vase in his mind, now he is preparing the lump of clay in a way it becomes a vase, isn't it? So all these things are like this. Now we have kind of imagination, okay, this is the way it should be. So we mentally think, proliferate, design, etc., etc. And now I am preparing it. So all these things are products of people's thinking, and ultimately that product can cause thinking in another person's mind. So we are in a kind of really vicious cycle. So this is very beautifully mentioned in the suttas. So how these things are interdependent. How concepts promote thinking, and how thinking promotes more conceptual proliferation. So this is where we need to think little, seriously. So if we are not little concerned about these things, so we are being driven by various conceptual proliferations. Ultimately we can't even stop ourselves. And the depth, the influence, the end result. It could be a mental disease even. And the rumination is one area where the same kind of thinking happens again and again in a person's mind that he can't stop it. Conceptual proliferation is little different, where in many different ways thinking is going on, this direction, that direction, many different ways. He can't stop. That is one area. Rumination is area, a kind of repetitive thought is going on and again on. You can't stop. So all are causing mostly the depression. So therefore, the Buddha's teaching here, so our mind has this tendency to proliferate, tendency to think in many different directions. That's the inner tendency we as human beings have. So as a result of that, we start thinking. I am is a mental proliferation. I am this is a mental proliferation. So Buddha mentioned, now suppose, so you are given with a photo of you. Now you immediately put your hand, this is I am. So Buddha mentioned, even this very subtle statement, I am, this is my photo. So this itself is a mental proliferation. So you can see what a very subtle form that we have to think about. I mean, we were thinking about the very, dynamic, many directional, manifold kind of obsessive thinking. But Buddha mentioned, I am itself is a mental proliferation. That very subtle thought, I am, is a mental proliferation. I am this is a mental proliferation. I am going to do that. I am going to be a doctor. I am going to win the race. I am going to win the election. That's a mental proliferation. I can't win the race. I am not going to participate. It's a mental proliferation. Na bhavissanti papanchita metang. Bhavissanti papanchita metang, na bhavissanti papanchita metang. Either you think, I am going to do it, it's also a papancha. I am not going to do it, that also papancha. You can imagine what a subtle level now we are talking here. I mean, if we are going through a huge amount of thinking, that is obvious. That is obviously papancha, we can say. But even the subtle level, Buddha mentioned, I am is a conceptual proliferation. Asmiti bhikkhave papanchita metang. Ayang ahang asmiti papanchita metang. This is I am, this I am, that I am this, I am that. All papancha. All conceptual proliferation. Now suppose you imagine that external person, external God, I am going to be that, I am going to unite with him. Another papancha. So even the very subtlest form of I am is a papancha. What a depth now Buddha is talking. You can imagine that. So that is the depth here. So there's a very interesting verse available in one sutta called Tuvataka Sutta. Moolam papancha sankhaya manta asmiti sabbang uparundhe. So here Buddha mentioned the root cause of papancha is this I am. We all has the sense of I am. So this is the root cause. Now say for example, when we are talking about a language, we are talking, first person, second person, third person, right? So who is the first person? I am. I am the first person. Who is the second person? Maybe you are the second person. He is the third person. So who has kept in the first? So I am the first. So we have prepared all our grammar based on this I. I appear as the center point. So based on I, so I am preparing all different languages, all the grammar, different terminologies, statements, languages, different things. So this very root cause, I am, Buddha mentioned, is the root cause of all papancha. And the advice here is, Moolam papancha sankhaya manta asmiti sabbang uparunde. So therefore Buddha mentioned, through your wisdom, be aware how this I am arising within yourself. And now cut it off. So that's we are going to talk maybe tomorrow. So how to overcome papancha. So now actually today I want to highlight about the depth of this whole subject. So very, very interesting subject. And it is something that we need to cut off. Especially the papancha. That's why Buddha mentioned, papancha birata paja nippapancha tathagata. These folk, this whole world, all these, humans and the devas, they are addicted to papancha. They are addicted to too much thinking. But how about the Tathagatas? How about the Buddhas, the Arahants? Free from papancha. That's a significant factor with respect to a Arahant. They are completely free from conceptual proliferation. There may be thoughts, but not conceptual proliferation. Nippapancha Tathagata. Therefore, Nippapancha is a synonym for Nibbana. You can see the depth. So if we are capable of completely cutting off the papancha, we are avoiding papancha, and we have a kind of a tendency for nippapancha, a mind free from conceptual proliferation. You prefer to keep your mind calm. You prefer to keep your mind relaxed. You prefer to keep your mind less thinking. If it is necessary, you can think. After thinking, how about calming down? How to stop? How to be silent? So that is the path. That is the path to Nippapancha, in a way. So with that, I like to conclude today's Dhamma sermon. We will discuss tomorrow about various possibilities, how to overcome Papancha. And thank you very much for attentive listening. Today, Dawal Dana, that's the lunch Dana, in memory of our parents, Sam and Nanda Samarajiva. Also in memory of our beloved friends, Premita Seniviratna and Kamalika Abevikrama, who passed away 2 months ago. May their sansaric journey be short. So this is the sharing of merits we have today. And the whole day we were practicing to the best of our ability, and we have developed mindfulness, concentration, wisdom, and participated in a Dhamma discussion and listened to Dhamma sermon. All the merits that we have accumulated, let's share with all the celestial beings. Let's share with all the beings who are in need of merits, and with all the past away relatives. And we wish these merits help us also to attain path, fruition, Nibbana. While keeping these good wishes in our mind, let's recite the traditional verses. Ettavata cha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Ettavata cha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Ettavata cha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Akasattha ca bummattha deva naga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu sasanang. Akasattha ca bummattha deva naga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanang. Akasattha ca bummattha deva naga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mamparang. Idang vo ñātīnaṁ hotu sukita hontu ñātayo. Idang vo ñātīnaṁ hotu sukita hontu ñātayo. Idang vo ñātīnaṁ hotu sukita hontu ñātayo. Imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu yava nibbana pattiya. Imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu yava nibbana pattiya. Imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu yava nibbana pattiya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.